"What was your call sign, old man?" The question cracked across fleet operations like a rifle bolt snapping shut, sharp enough to turn heads across the war room. Captain Ryan Cole stood beneath the glow of the digital maritime board, one hand resting on a steel briefing table, the other pointing toward the old man seated alone beside a bank of inactive radios no one had touched in 20 years. Around them, the room pulsed with the cold hum of electronics, radar sweeps crawling across giant screens, blue light washing over rows of officers who suddenly forgot their paperwork. The old man did not answer. Elias Mercer sat motionless in a weathered olive jacket, hands folded over a worn leather satchel resting against his knee. His hair was silver, cut short, his posture almost relaxed, but there was something in the stillness around him that felt heavier than rank. Captain Cole mistook it for weakness. "I asked you a question." His voice carried farther this time, edged with that polished confidence earned too quickly by men promoted in peacetime. A few younger officers exchanged smirks. One lieutenant muttered, "Probably calls himself Grandpa One." Soft laughter flickered and died. Mercer lifted his eyes at last, pale and clear, the kind of eyes that looked through men instead of at them. He studied the captain the way an old navigator studies weather gathering over black water. "Some names stay buried for a reason, Captain," he said quietly. His voice was gravel and distance. It made the room seem smaller. Cole leaned in, sensing a crowd. "This is a command floor, not a veterans museum. If you've got a call sign, say it." The silence that followed felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. Somewhere above them, ventilation sighed through steel ducts. A wall clock ticked loud enough to be noticed. Then Mercer reached into his jacket and touched the edge of a faded patch stitched near the chest, fingers lingering as though touching another lifetime. "Hammer 6. The words landed softly. Too softly. But the effect was immediate. At the far end of the room, Chief Petty Officer Mason Reed froze with a data tablet half raised. His face changed in a way only old sailors recognize when a ghost steps into daylight. Captain Cole laughed once, uncertain. "Hammer 6? That's supposed to impress somebody." Mercer said nothing. He turned his gaze toward the giant tactical map glowing over the Pacific. For a second his eyes narrowed, as if seeing beyond the room, beyond the base, beyond the years. Rain on jungle leaves. Radio static. Rotor wash. Voices carried through storms. Then it was gone. Reed moved without drawing attention, stepping toward a secure side console. His fingers hovered over an encrypted line. Cole kept talking, unaware his own authority had begun slipping under him. "You know what I think," he said. "I think old legends get bigger every time they're retold." But Reed was already dialing. Across the room, a green indicator blinked alive on a dormant communications channel no one remembered activating. One officer frowned. Another looked up from his monitor. Then a low electronic tone pulsed through the war room. Not an alarm. A recognition code. Mercer didn't move. His face remained carved from calm. Cole turned toward the sound, irritation tightening his jaw. Who triggered that? Nobody answered. Reed listened into the secure line, his expression draining of color. "Sir," he whispered, barely breathing, "Hammer 6 is here." On the other end came only silence. Then, faint even across the room, a chair slammed backward. The secure line went dead, but the silence it left behind carried more weight than any order Captain Ryan Cole had ever given. No one in fleet operations moved. The soft glow of tactical screens reflected across rigid faces now fixed on the old man beside the radios. Chief Mason Reed lowered the handset as if it had become heavier in his grip. He had served 26 years in uniform, through storms at sea and deployments in places men rarely discussed, and yet sweat had formed beneath his collar. Captain Cole saw it and frowned. "Chief, what exactly did you just do?" Reed did not answer at first. His eyes remained on Elias Mercer. There was caution there now, and something rarer than caution. Reverence. A low static hiss drifted from one of the old analog radios beside Mercer, though no one had powered them in years. The sound stirred something in the room. Officers began exchanging uncertain looks. Cole stepped closer to Mercer, pride refusing retreat. "This is some kind of joke, is it not?" Mercer looked toward the dead radio, listening as though hearing a voice too distant for others to catch. "No joke, Captain," he said. "Just old echoes." Before Cole could answer, the green recognition light blinked again. Once. Twice. Then every monitor along the command wall flickered, as if an unseen hand had passed through the network. A classified access banner flashed across one central screen before vanishing. A lieutenant at the systems station whispered, "Who has override authority for that?" Nobody answered. Reed did, barely above a breath. "Only flag command." The words seemed to lower the room temperature. Cole forced a laugh, but it landed thin. "You are all acting like this man is a myth." Mercer tilted his head slightly. "Myths are safer than memories." His fingers brushed the old leather satchel. Cole noticed now it was worn smooth from decades of use, scarred in places by time. It looked ordinary. Somehow that made it stranger. Reed stepped forward. "Captain, maybe we should pause this." Cole turned sharply. "Pause what?" "We are indulging a retiree with a story." But even he no longer sounded convinced. From outside the blast doors came footsteps. Fast. Purposeful. Running. Heads turned. Mercer did not. He seemed almost saddened. "You should not have opened that name," he said quietly. Cole folded his arms. "And why is that?" Mercer finally met his eyes fully. "Because some call signs do not belong to history. They belong to promises." Before Cole could press him, a young ensign near the far console stared at a monitor and went pale. "Sir," his voice cracked. "You need to see this." The main operations screen had shifted. No one had touched it. A decades-old mission overlay, grainy and marked classified, spread across the Pacific sector display. Coordinates pulsed in amber. In the lower corner, one identifier blinked like a heartbeat. Hammer 6. A murmur moved through the room like wind through rigging. Cole stared, color leaving his face one shade at a time. "What is this?" Reed answered without looking at him. "A ghost file." Mercer rose slowly from his chair. Every officer instinctively stepped back, not from fear, but from the strange gravity gathering around him. At 6 feet, he still carried himself with the effortless balance of someone who had spent a lifetime reading unstable ground. The old patch on his chest caught the blue light. For a second, even the hum of machines seemed to fade. Then from beyond the war room doors came the hard metallic boom of security locks releasing in sequence. One after another. "Command access protocol." Reed whispered what nobody wanted to say aloud. "The Admiral is coming himself." And for the first time since he had demanded the old veteran speak, Captain Ryan Cole felt the floor beneath his certainty begin to shift. The final lock disengaged with a steel thud that rolled through fleet operations like distant thunder. Every head turned toward the blast doors. Even the digital maps seemed to hold still. Captain Ryan Cole felt the room slipping beyond his command, though no one had raised a voice. It was the silence that unsettled him now. Elias Mercer stood unmoving beside the old radios, one hand resting lightly on the leather satchel, as if waiting for a tide he had already seen coming. Then the doors opened. 2 security officers entered first, not with urgency, but with ritual precision, stepping aside moments later as Admiral Nathan Reeves crossed the threshold. No announcement, no entourage, just the quiet force of a man whose presence bent the room before he spoke. Every officer snapped to attention by instinct. Chairs scraped. Boots struck deck plating. Captain Cole stiffened and saluted. The Admiral did not return it. His eyes had already found Mercer. For one impossible moment Nathan Reeves stopped walking. The kind of stillness that belongs only to recognition settled over his face. Decades seemed to pass through his expression in silence. "Hammer 6, he said at last, but it was almost a breath, not a title spoken aloud. Mercer gave the smallest nod. "Still standing, Admiral." No one moved. No one dared. Captain Cole looked between them, confusion, collapsing into dread. He had expected correction, perhaps reprimand. Not this. Admiral Reeves stepped closer, slower now, as though approaching something sacred. His gaze drifted to the old patch on Mercer's chest. Weathered thread. Faded insignia. The kind forgotten by museums. The Admiral lifted a hand, but did not touch it. "I thought they buried that name with the mission." Mercer gave a tired half-smile. "Some things do not stay buried." Reed lowered his eyes. Several younger officers seemed unable to breathe. Captain Cole found his voice. "Sir, with respect, who is he?" Reeves turned. In what Captain Cole saw there was not anger. It was disbelief that such a question had been asked. "Who is he?" the Admiral repeated softly. He looked back at Mercer before answering. "The reason some of us came home." The words struck harder than shouted orders. Cole felt heat rise under his collar. He had spent years believing rank defined gravity. Now he watched gravity answer to something older. The central tactical display still pulsed with the classified overlay. Reeves glanced toward it. "Bring up Pacific Archive, Operation Lantern Ridge." A systems officer hesitated. "Sir, that archive is restricted beyond my clearance." Reeves answered without turning. "Not anymore." Fingers moved over keys. Grainy reconnaissance images filled the main wall. Storm seas. Carrier outlines. Radio traffic logs. Then a call sign repeated through archived text like a pulse through history. Hammer 6. Mercer watched in silence, but the blue glow across his face seemed to carry rain, salt wind, and another lifetime. Cole stepped toward the screen, unable not to. That operation was never in the Academy briefings. Reeves looked at him. It was never supposed to be. Then the Admiral did something no one in the room expected. He came to full attention before Elias Mercer, a 4-star admiral standing rigid before an old man in a worn field jacket. Then he saluted. Perfect. Sharp. Absolute. Air itself seemed to leave the room. Every officer followed a heartbeat later. Even Captain Ryan Cole. The war room became still as stone beneath a forest of raised hands. Mercer held the silence. Eyes distant. "You should not have reopened Hammer 6, he said quietly. Reeves lowered his salute. "I did not reopen it." His voice carried now, low and iron steady. "You walked back into it." Then he turned toward the tactical board and said words that made Reed grip the table edge. "Seal fleet operations. No one leaves. We are going to tell them what Hammer 6 really was." The heavy blast doors sealed with a hydraulic hiss, and fleet operations became a vault of memory. No one spoke. Even the younger officers who had spent their careers trusting satellites and algorithms now stood fixed beneath the pale light of the tactical board, waiting on a story the room itself seemed to recognize. Admiral Nathan Reeves moved toward the central display and rested one hand on the steel edge of the command table. 47 years ago, he said, his voice carrying the quiet weight of a confession long delayed. There was a mission so deniable it was erased before most of you were born. With a touch of his security badge, a second archive opened. Black and white reconnaissance photographs rolled across the wall. Storm swells. A carrier deck underring. A hand-drawn tactical chart marked in grease pencil. The room felt transported. Captain Ryan Cole stared as if the screens had become a window into a hidden republic beneath history. Mercer remained standing, expression unreadable, but something in his gaze had gone far beyond the room. Reeves pointed toward a faded image of a communications station lashed by weather. When the fleet lost command relay in a Pacific storm, every system failed except one emergency field channel. One voice held the line together. He paused. Hammer 6. The call sign hung in the air differently now. No longer rumor. No longer myth. A pulse through living memory. Mercer's hand drifted to the leather satchel. His thumb brushed an old worn clasp. The touch stirred something deep and far away. Salt wind. Wet steel. Radio static threading through darkness. For a moment his eyes seemed to reflect another century. Captain Cole noticed. Sir, he said quietly to the Admiral, no arrogance left in him. What made that call sign classified? Reeves looked toward Mercer before answering. Because what he did that night changed outcomes no government could officially admit. The tactical map zoomed inward. A narrow corridor at sea, layered weather fronts, ghosted route markings. Mercer stepped closer to the board without invitation. Officers parted instinctively. He studied the chart once, only once, then lifted one finger toward a drift line none of the analysts had questioned. Your current route simulation is wrong, he said. Several heads turned. One commander frowned. Mercer touched a current vector blinking near the strait. Storm shear would push vessels 8 nautical miles west by dawn. Your models assume clean water. That water never runs clean. He said it the way a rancher comments on weather. Calm. Final. The room went silent. A navigation lieutenant rapidly checked the model. His mouth opened. He is right. Reeves almost smiled. He usually was. Cole felt his understanding fracture further. This was not nostalgia. This was mastery untouched by time. Mercer looked at the map as though speaking to old ghosts. We did not survive because we had better machines. His voice dropped. We survived because somebody listened to what machines could not hear. The old analog radio beside him crackled again, faint and sudden. A breath of static. Every eye snapped toward it. Reed whispered, "It is not even powered." Mercer laid a hand gently over the metal housing. "Some circuits, remember." A strange hush fell. Then Reeves reached into a secure folder delivered by one of the security officers and removed a yellowed operations photo. He held it up for the room. 5 young men in storm gear stood beside a communications mast, faces blurred by rain. One bore a handwritten patch, Hammer 6. Reeves placed the photo before Cole. "Look carefully, Captain." Cole studied the younger face in the image, then slowly looked at Mercer. Same pale eyes. Same impossible stillness. His breath caught. "Sir," Reeves answered before he finished. "Yes." Then the Admiral turned to the room. Today was supposed to be a routine readiness review. He let that settle. It just became a lesson in why legends are often just records. The bureaucracy was too small to hold. Mercer gave a faint, tired exhale, almost amusement. "You always did talk too much, Nathan." A ripple of stunned laughter, nervous and reverent, moved through the room. Then the central screen flashed red. Incoming encrypted naval signal. Priority immediate. Reed stared at the code header and went pale. "Admiral," his voice nearly failed him. "The fleet just transmitted an authentication request." Reeves looked at Mercer. "For what?" Reed swallowed. "They are asking if Hammer 6 is active again." For 3 full seconds, no one in fleet operations breathed. The encrypted request pulsed red across the central screen like a heartbeat no one had expected to hear again. Authentication request, Hammer 6 status. The words glowed against the darkened tactical board, unreal and cold. Captain Ryan Cole read them twice before meaning reached him. This was no ceremonial reverence. Somewhere beyond this room, beyond these walls and polished ranks, the fleet itself had recognized a ghost. Chief Mason Reed looked from the signal to Elias Mercer as though waiting for history to answer. Admiral Nathan Reeves stepped toward the console. "Source?" he asked. "Carrier Strike Group, Eastern Pacific Exercise Zone," Reed replied. "Storm conditions disrupting autonomous navigation. They are requesting legacy confirmation protocol." Mercer gave a slow exhale through his nose, almost like an old man amused by fate, still trusting dead men to fix live problems. Reeves looked at him. "Seems they remember." The Admiral nodded toward the screen. "Patch them through." Came over the speaker, clipped by interference. "Fleet Command to Authentication Channel. Requesting verification." "Repeat, requesting Hammer 6 verification." Every officer in the room froze. It was as though time bent inward. Reeves turned toward Mercer, but did not issue an order. He did something rarer. He waited. Mercer stepped toward the radio. The room opened around him as naturally as water parts around stone. His hands settled on the microphone, worn black rubber polished by years no one here had lived. For a moment he did not speak. His eyes had gone somewhere beyond steel walls, into weather and memory. Rain against carrier decks. Green signal lamps. Voices carried over midnight seas. Then his thumb pressed the transmit key. "This is Hammer 6. His voice moved through the room like something old waking. Even the static seemed to listen. Silence followed on the line, long enough to unsettle everyone. Then the young voice returned, changed now, unsteady with disbelief. "Authentication confirmed." Murmurs broke across fleet operations. One lieutenant removed his glasses as if his own eyes had betrayed him. Captain Cole felt the hairs rise on his arms. He had mocked a legend less than an hour earlier. Now he stood inside one. The radio crackled again. "Sir, our navigation net is drifting west in storm shear. We are losing confidence in the model." Mercer looked at the tactical map. "Bring up the drift corridor." The board shifted. Sea lanes glowed amber. Wind vectors moved in silent arcs. Mercer studied it for maybe 5 seconds. "No more. Your lead carrier is compensating against the wrong current. Shift convoy heading 7 degrees east and hold speed below 18 knots for 12 nautical miles." A commander whispered. "He solved that faster than the simulation." Reeves answered, eyes still on Mercer. "That is because he is reading the ocean, not the software." The recommendation was transmitted. The room listened. Seconds stretched. Then the radio returned. This time with awe impossible to hide. Course correction stabilized the group. Drift error gone. No one spoke. They simply stared at the old veteran beside the antique radio. Captain Ryan. Cole felt something inside him give way, not from humiliation, but recognition. The kind men spend lifetimes chasing. Mercer released the microphone and stepped back as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Storm still turns left at dawn," he murmured. "It always did." Reeves looked at him with a quiet that held decades. "You just saved a fleet exercise from 6,000 miles away." Mercer shrugged. "Just answered a call." But Reed was staring at a second signal, now appearing on screen. "Priority command incoming from Pacific Flag Headquarters." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Admiral, they are not just thanking Hammer 6. He looked up, stunned. "They are requesting," he briefed the fleet. The request hung over fleet operations with the force of a storm front. "They are requesting," he briefed the fleet. Chief Mason Reed repeated the words as if saying them twice might make them less impossible. No one laughed. No one questioned it. The old assumptions in the room had been burned away too quietly for that. Admiral Nathan Reeves stepped toward the secure command console and read the transmission himself, jaw set, eyes unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he smiled. 47 years, he murmured, and the fleet still knows who to call. Captain Ryan Cole looked at Elias Mercer as though seeing him for the first time. Not as an old man in a faded field jacket, not as some relic wandering into a restricted command floor, but as a living axis around which the room had somehow begun to turn. Mercer, however, looked almost annoyed. "I came here for coffee and silence," he said. "Now you have dragged me back into paperwork." A ripple of restrained laughter moved through the officers, tension breaking for the first time. Yet beneath it ran awe. Reeves gestured toward the tactical board. "Patch Pacific Flag Headquarters through main command audio." The communications officer obeyed. Moments later, the war room speakers carried the voice of a distant fleet commander, seasoned, composed, carrying salt and authority. "Fleet operations, this is Vice Admiral Corbett. Is authentication true?" Reeves answered, but looked at Mercer while doing so. "Affirmative. Hammer 6 is in the room." There was silence over the line. Then, unexpectedly, the older admiral's voice lowered. "I never thought I would hear those words outside the archives." Several younger officers exchanged startled glances. Even among admirals, the name carried weight. Mercer stepped toward the microphone before anyone invited him. "Corbett," he said, "you still driving ships too fast into bad weather?" The line went dead quiet. Then a rough laugh came through the speakers. "Mercer, I was an ensign the last time I heard you on a channel." It hit the room all at once. These men were not discussing legend. They were speaking to an equal. Reeves folded his arms, letting the moment settle. "They want a fleet brief," he said softly to Mercer. "Looks like retirement is canceled." Mercer glanced at the glowing map. "Brief them then." Reed moved fast, routing the tactical display to fleet network. Screens shifted. Carrier groups. Weather overlays. Blue arcs across open Pacific water. Mercer stood before the wall of data like an old rancher reading cloud lines over open prairie. No flourish. No speech. Just quiet command. "Your storm front is not your problem," he said into the channel. "Your assumptions are." Officers leaned in. Every word landed. "You are treating current as obstacle. It is leverage. Let it carry you east, not fight you west." He pointed at the display. "Shift outer escort pickets 3 nautical miles inward. You are guarding open water while exposing the seam." The room was so silent the ventilation could be heard again. Corbett answered after a beat. "Adjusting now." Captain Cole watched analysts around him scramble to verify what Mercer had seen in seconds. Each check came back the same. "Correct." Again, Cole whispered almost to himself. "How does he see what none of us saw?" Reeves answered without taking his eyes off Mercer. "Because experience does not think in data. It listens." Minutes passed in concentrated stillness until the fleet channel returned. "Formation stabilized," Corbett reported. "Recommend all flag students hear this man." Then came words no one in fleet operations expected. "Requesting Hammer 6 address the full Pacific. Command symposium tomorrow." A young lieutenant nearly dropped his headset. Reed simply stared. Mercer rubbed his forehead as if inconvenienced. "I am 82 years old," he muttered. "I did not come here to lecture admirals." Reeves stepped beside him. "Maybe not." Then lower, so only those near heard it. "But perhaps you came because some promises still call." Mercer looked at the old radio, at the faded patch on his chest, at the officers who had begun this day doubting him and now stood like students before a master. Captain Ryan Cole swallowed hard, then stepped forward at last. His voice had none of its former edge. Sir. He stopped, searching for the right word. Not veteran. Not mister. Something heavier. Finally he said it. Permission to ask a question, Commander. Mercer turned. For the first time, a faint smile reached his eyes. Now you are asking correctly. Captain Ryan Cole stood straighter than he had all morning, though not from rank now. It was the posture of a man trying to stand correctly in the presence of something he had misjudged. Fleet operations had gone quiet again, but it was a different silence than before. Not tension. Attention. The kind found in chapels, on bridges before dawn, or in rooms where history unexpectedly sits down beside the living. Elias Mercer regarded the captain for a long moment. The pale blue in his eyes had softened. Ask, he said. Cole hesitated, surprising even himself. When you looked at that tactical map, you saw things none of us saw. No algorithm flagged them. No predictive model caught them. How? A younger version of the captain might have made the question sound defensive. Now it sounded almost humble. Mercer glanced at the glowing Pacific routes. Because the ocean does not repeat itself, he said. But men make the same assumptions over and over. Several officers leaned closer. Mercer stepped toward the command table and, with one finger, traced an invisible line across the map. You all trust screens to show what is happening. We were trained to feel what was coming. His voice was low, rough, effortless. The room listened the way sailors listen for foghorns. Wind has texture. Water has temperament. Silence has warning in it. Captain Cole frowned in concentration, absorbing every word. Can that still be taught? Mercer looked at him, almost amused. Only if somebody stops believing technology replaced judgment. Admiral Nathan Reeves folded his hands behind his back. That, he said quietly, is why I brought him here years ago, and he refused every advisory post I offered. Mercer gave him a sideways look. You offered paperwork. A soft laugh moved through the room. Then Cole did something none of the officers expected. He took one measured step forward and removed the command briefing badge clipped at his chest. He set it on the steel table. Sir, he said to Mercer, voice steady but weighted, earlier I treated you like an intruder. He paused. I was wrong. No one moved. No one interrupted. This was a different kind of ceremony. Mercer studied him. Being wrong is cheap, Captain. Learning costs more. Cole nodded once. Then teach me. Chief Reed looked down, hiding a smile. Even Admiral Reeves seemed to savor the moment. Mercer walked toward the old analog radio and rested his hand on it. All right, he said. Lesson 1. He pointed at the tactical board. Tell me where your weak seam is. Cole looked at the carrier formation. For a long moment he said nothing. Officers watched, almost holding breath for him. Then slowly he pointed toward the inward escort arc Mercer had corrected earlier. Here. Mercer nodded. Why? Cole answered after a beat. Because we were defending where attack was unlikely, not where confusion begins. A pause. Mercer's faint smile deepened. Now you are seeing. Something changed in the room then. Not dramatic. Deeper. The captain was no longer challenger. He had become student. The reversal landed without noise. Suddenly the command speakers chimed again. Pacific Flag Headquarters returning. Vice Admiral Corbett's voice carried through. Fleet correction holding. Symposium command requests immediate live advisory from Hammer 6. Mercer looked almost offended. I have become very popular for a man trying to retire. Reeves stepped beside him. You always were. Then Corbett added, also transmitting. Ceremonial directive from Naval Command. Reed checked the incoming file, blinked, then looked up stunned. Admiral, it is a formal honors notice. Reeves took the printout, read it once, and for the first time all day seemed genuinely shaken. Captain Cole saw his expression change. Sir. Reeves looked toward Mercer. Naval Command just reinstated a commendation frozen since Lantern Ridge. The room went still. Reeves lifted his eyes. They are ordering an honor guard to this room. Even Mercer frowned. For what? Reeves answered with quiet gravity. To return something they should have given you 47 years ago. The blast doors began unlocking once more. Heavy, sequential, ceremonial. Footsteps approached in measured cadence from the corridor beyond. Captain Ryan Cole turned toward the doors, pulse rising, but this time not from pride or fear. From awe. Mercer merely stood beside the old radio, calm as weathered stone, while the room prepared to witness something none of them would ever forget. The blast doors opened with a measured hydraulic sigh, and 8 sailors in dress whites entered in perfect cadence, their steps echoing across the steel deck with a rhythm older than anyone in the room. Conversation vanished. Even the hum of electronics seemed to recede before ceremony. At their center walked a silver-haired command master chief, carrying a dark wooden presentation case with both hands, as if bearing something too weighty for one man alone. Captain Ryan Cole felt his throat tighten. Fleet operations no longer resembled a war room. It had become a place of reckoning. Admiral Nathan Reeves stepped forward and came to attention. Every officer followed. Elias Mercer remained still beside the old analog radio, his weathered hand resting lightly on the metal housing, as though anchored by old ghosts. The Master Chief stopped 6 feet before him and rendered a salute so sharp it seemed to cut the silence. "Commander Elias Mercer," he said, voice carrying ceremonial gravity. "By order of United States Naval Command, suspended honors attached to Operation Lantern Ridge are hereby restored." Mercer stared as though the words belonged to someone long dead. "That was buried," he said quietly. "So was a great deal that should not have been," Reeves answered. The wooden case was opened. Inside rested a weathered command insignia mounted beside a folded citation and an old brass challenge coin dulled by time. Nothing glittered, nothing ornate. Yet the room seemed unable to look away. The Master Chief lifted the insignia with white-gloved hands. "Recovered from sealed archives. Returned to rightful command." Mercer's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Captain Cole saw the old veteran's composure shift for the first time, not broken, but touched. Reeves took the insignia and held it in both hands before Mercer. "You wore this in waters none of US should have asked you to enter." His voice lowered. "We failed to return it." Mercer looked at the insignia for a long moment, then said almost to himself, "I thought that went down with the mast." Reeves answered, "Some things wait to come home." There was no applause, no speeches, only the dense stillness of earned respect. Then came the reversal no one expected. Reeves turned toward Captain Ryan Cole. "Captain, front and center." Cole stepped forward, pulse loud in his ears. "You demanded his call sign this morning." The Admiral's tone held no accusation, only iron. "Now you will perform the restoration." Cole looked stunned. "Sir, I am not worthy of that." "That," Reeves said quietly, "is why you are." The room watched as Cole received the insignia with careful hands, almost trembling. He faced Mercer. Hours earlier he had challenged him with arrogance. Now he stood before him like a man approaching sacred ground. "Commander Mercer," he said, voice roughened by humility. "Permission to restore your command." Mercer regarded him in silence, then nodded once. Cole pinned the insignia onto the faded field jacket over the old patch, hands deliberate, respectful. The moment his fingers left the metal, something seemed to settle into place beyond symbol. The room felt it. Even the young lieutenants understood they were watching more than protocol. They were watching dignity returned. Chief Reed quietly wiped one eye and pretended to adjust his headset. Then the Master Chief opened the citation and began reading. It spoke not of heroics or glory, but of steadiness under impossible uncertainty, of command exercised when systems failed, of judgment trusted when maps ended. Each line made the room stand straighter. Mercer listened with lowered eyes. When the reading ended, Reeves stepped close. "Commander," he said, voice nearly breaking despite himself, "the fleet never forgot." Mercer looked around at the officers, the glowing tactical maps, the old radio still humming faintly beside him. "Funny," he murmured. "I spent years believing silence meant erasure." Reeves answered, "Sometimes silence is only history waiting for witnesses." Then Vice Admiral Corbett's voice returned over the speakers. "Fleet Symposium standing by, Hammer 6. A pause. They want to hear from the man behind the call sign." Mercer gave a tired half-smile. "I was hoping this day was done surprising me." But Captain Cole, no longer the same man who had mocked an old veteran, spoke before anyone else. "Sir," he said softly, almost with reverence, "the fleet may be waiting, but so are we." Mercer looked at him, and in that look was acceptance. Then he stepped toward the command microphone as every officer in fleet operations unconsciously drew to attention. The command microphone stood in front of Elias Mercer like an object from another lifetime. black metal worn smooth where countless hands had once trusted it. Fleet operations had gone utterly still. Admirals waited. Sailors in dress whites stood motionless. Captain Ryan Cole remained at attention beside the old veteran, the restored insignia now fixed above Mercer's faded patch, catching the blue light of the tactical board. Across the Pacific, an entire command symposium was listening. Mercer rested one hand on the microphone, but for several seconds he said nothing. He simply looked across the room at the officers who had become witnesses to something larger than rank. Then his voice came, low and weathered, carrying through speakers 6,000 miles away. "This is Hammer 6. Static whispered softly after the words, like old seas answering. No one in fleet operations moved. Mercer looked at the tactical map glowing before him. "You asked for a lesson," he said. "Here it is." His eyes drifted toward Captain Cole for only a moment. "Do not mistake systems for wisdom." He pointed toward the Pacific routes. "Machines fail. Charts age. Signals drift. Judgment is what remains." Every word landed with the gravity of things earned. Even Vice Admiral Corbett's distant command channel held silent. Mercer continued, "The ocean does not reward pride. Neither does command." Captain Cole lowered his eyes slightly, understanding the words were meant for him and for every officer in the room. Yet there was no rebuke in them, only truth. Listen longer than you speak. Watch what others ignore. And when an old voice tells you a storm turns left at dawn, a faint smile touched his face. Believe him. Soft laughter moved through the room, warm and reverent. Then Mercer's tone shifted, quieter still. "And one more thing. Never ask a man's call sign unless you are prepared to hear the life behind it." Something in the room seemed to settle permanently after that. A lesson had become legacy. Corbett's voice returned over the speakers, uncharacteristically subdued. "Pacific Command acknowledges." Then after a pause, "and salutes." On the tactical board, one by one, secure links from vessels across the fleet began appearing. Destroyers, carrier groups, support ships. Signal acknowledgments stacked across the screen in neat rows. Reed stared in disbelief. "Sir," he whispered, "they are all standing to attention." Reeves looked at Mercer, pride unhidden now. The fleet is saluting him. Captain Cole felt his chest tighten. This morning he had demanded a call sign with arrogance. Now an ocean answered it. Then, without command given, Admiral Nathan Reeves came to full attention once more and raised his salute. Every officer followed. The sailors in dress whites followed. Captain Ryan Cole followed last, but held it hardest. Through the open channel, reports came from ship after ship. Crews standing. Bridges silent. Caps removed. Thousands of sailors honoring a man most had never met. Mercer stood in the center of it all, almost embarrassed by the scale of reverence. He slowly returned the salute. No speech followed. None was needed. Silence filled the war room, deep and heavy as old water. At length Mercer lowered his hand and stepped back from the microphone. "I think," he said softly, "that is enough attention for one old signalman." A few smiles appeared through damp eyes. Reeves moved beside him. "You just briefed the Pacific Fleet in a field jacket older than half my admirals." Mercer shrugged. "Still fits." Even he allowed a small grin. Then Captain Cole stepped forward one final time. Not as challenger, not even as student. As witness. "Sir," he said, voice unsteady. "Earlier I asked for your call sign." He swallowed. "I should have asked for your story." Mercer looked at him long, then rested a hand on the young captain's shoulder. "Now you know they are the same thing." The old analog radio crackled once, softly, almost like a sigh. Mercer turned toward it, fingers brushing the metal with familiar affection. "Some signals fade," he murmured. "Some just wait." No one spoke after that. They only stood in the sacred hush of a room, changed forever. Outside the blast doors, evening light bled gold across the harbor. Inside, beneath screens and steel and old remembered static, Captain Ryan Cole understood a truth no academy had taught him. Respect is not demanded by rank. It is awakened by character. And some call signs do not echo because they were feared. They echo because they were worthy. Some salutes last a lifetime.